Namaskar, Nilesh here with part 2 of Shraddha and Pradnya series. Only a few days ago, I published one paper, one article on the veracity of the Mahabharata and Krishna, since both of them are connected. And I could find empirical, objectively testable, and therefore scientific evidence for not only the Mahabharata war, which I have published in 2 books, but also for the entire lifespan of Bhagwan Krishna. And that second part related to Bhagwan Krishna and his lifetime has not been published until now, although I have given multiple lectures on it. So I thought I will write this article. There was another occasion for this, and that was a seminar on the veracity of Mahabharata and Krishna organized by the Cultural Ministry, Government of India, in collaboration with Bhandarkar Oriental Research Institute. So Bhandarkar Oriental Research Institute in Pune was the place where it was conducted. I participated via Zoom. In fact, I had a meeting with some of the officials of Cultural Ministry, and they asked me for a list of other Mahabharata researchers, current Mahabharata researchers, specifically working on the dating. And I did shared with them a list of as many Mahabharata researchers who have worked on dating I could think of. And if I remember, I don't have that list with me here, but if I remember, I gave them at least a list of 20 plus people, 20 plus individuals. And I can tell you that their claims range from, I like to think, say, 1000 BCE all the way to 5561 BCE, my claim. And eventually, this particular article will be published through the proceedings of this particular workshop, seminar, whatever you want to call it. However, I also want to ensure that I have a ready reference to give it to individuals who contact me asking me for a good summary of my research on the dating of Mahabharata, in this case, as it happens. So I had it published on myend.net, and my gratitude and thanks to the editor, Haritha, and also Pramod Boravalli, who is behind this selfless initiative for many years now. So I would encourage people who are interested in the dating of Mahabharata to go to the site myend.net and read that paper. Again, as I say multiple times, it's one reading won't be sufficient. You will miss a lot. You will miss 90% of it. So possibly 10 readings are required. Now, when I posted this was on a Twitter, September 25, which is not that long ago, like a few days ago, 5 days ago. Today is 29th September. A couple of, multiple responses came, many acknowledging the great work. They actually read it. Many said it's a pure gold. Of course, besides Twitter, many other people also responded through other means of contacting me. Now, on Twitter, somebody, and we have his name also, Manoj Jadhav, we'll call him MJ. Again, it's very important that I'm thankful that he asked this question. He may be representing his own query or own challenge, possibly. Could be his confusion, or he might be representing confusion of many others. In fact, the question he's asking is, again, nothing out of the ordinary, a recurring, chronic question, frequently asked question, a chronic confusion. Sissy, that's my term, okay? The reason I'm mentioning this, because it's not about him. It's not about him asking the question. In fact, I like to thank him for his courage, for his curiosity, for his interest to ask this question, for the benefit of all of us, definitely for his benefit, and very likely, in fact, I'm confident, for the benefit of many others, many ordinary Indians, many Indians in academia, many Indians who consider themselves experts in Mahabharata, and many other Mahabharata enthusiasts, which is what practically all Indians are interested in the Mahabharata. He posed two questions, and yes, there is a question marks in his comment. So thank you, Manoj. So one, he said, how can you, I'll read backwards because that number reads 2 and then number 3. So one at the bottom first. How can you prove 5561 BC with archaeology evidence? How can you prove city of Mathura existed in 5561 BC? And the second question, he says, leave horse. Now, not because he and me discuss anything about the horse, but he says, forget horse. That may be even tougher. I think that's the tone of it. I don't want to psychoanalyze him, but it appears to be like that because that's what people have typically internalized this whole nonsense of the Aryan invasion. That Aryan invasion and the Aryans have to come, and that's only how Indians came to know of horse and the chariots and all that nonsense, okay? But we have internalized it. Many of us have internalized it to such an extent that somebody says, come on, there is no way you can prove the horse. There could be another reason why he might be saying, forget horse, but let's talk about the chariot now that we have found the chariot, okay. So he's saying, leave horse aside for a minute, but how can you prove war chariot used by warriors in 5561 BC? Then he's kind enough to actually give us the information, the updated, latest information that we have. He says, as evidence for the chariot, and he says evidence for the chariot does not go beyond 2200 BCE. What he means by that, the evidence for the chariot that is found in India, and even a specifically spoked chariot, okay, with a array in Marathi, what we call, does not go beyond 2200 BC. Because if you go other places outside India, like say, for example, Poland, we will not go into the quality of evidence, but there is at least a claim that a chariot with possibly spokes have been found, or wheels with spokes have been found in the area of Poland going back to as far as 3500 BC, but that's not what he's referring to. In any case, the oldest chariot or chariot wheel with spokes that is been found does not go beyond 3500 BCE anywhere in the world. So the question still remains that how can I or anyone prove a war chariot used by warriors in 5561 BCE? Because that is the year of Mahabharata war, based on my research work, based on all the empirical evidence from the Mahabharata text. And then he also adds something which is, again, a very good addition. He says, well, yeah, I'm asking you a question about the Mahabharata war in 5561 BCE. But let me also remind you, you have claimed, which is I have claimed, I have shown using Valmiki Ramayana evidence. So when I say it, I have shown it, I have demonstrated, I have proved, I have established that Ramayana happened around 12,000 BCE, or to be precise, Ram Ravan Yuddha in 12,209 BCE. And of course, he says on and on, we can go to Rigveda and the chariots are mentioned there too, and so on and so forth, which goes beyond 21,000 years and so on. But bringing it back to Mahabharata times, how can we show that? How can I show, prove, not show, prove that there was a chariot in 5561 BCE? And how can I prove 5561 BC as the year of Mahabharata war using archaeology evidence? Or for example, how can I prove that the city of Mathura existed in 5561 BC? Okay, there are 2-3 questions related to each other, all great questions. They are all frequently asked questions, okay? And they are based on the chronic confusion about what it means to prove something, what it means that you have some evidence, what it means to bring the evidence together, or do we even need to bring the evidence together? Many people don't realize that. They just look at something and just bingo, you finally somehow jump to the conclusion, which means many people don't understand the process of science, the process of triangulation of the modern science, or the process of quadrangulation described by Krishna to Uddhava in Bhagavad Puran. Okay, and that is what is the leading cause for this chronic confusion. But I would like to thank MJ for this, and let's get into some of the answers. All right, let me check for a second that it's doing this. And let me share again. All right. Okay. So let's summarize his questions then. How can we prove war chariots used by warriors in 5561 BCE? Because the evidence found for chariots do not go beyond 2200 BCE. And the second question, how can you prove 5561 BC as the year of Mahabharata war with archaeology evidence? And for example, the places of the Mahabharata times, such as Mathura, he didn't ask beyond Mathura, but this would also apply to places like Kurukshetra. Like, can we prove the antiquity of Kurukshetra going back to 6th millennium BC, which is 5561 BC, or antiquity of, say, Hastinapur going back to 6th millennium BC, 5561 BC, keeping in mind that actually the same question can be asked for older events such as Ramayana, which I have shown to be more than 14,000 years ago. All right. We have got a doubt clearing machine. These are good doubts, by the way. Okay. All the discussion begins with the doubt. And Samshaya, the Sanskrit word is Samshaya. And that is very important. Unless we have a doubt, there is no reason for a discussion, frankly. And we may not need to have any discussion. I mean, if somebody just takes it based on a pure Shraddha, somebody said it, somebody in a place of authority said it, that's it. That's good enough for me. Nothing wrong with that, although that will not be a sufficient way of understanding the world around us in every situation. Anyways, let's get here. This is the doubt clearing machine. We have got main 5 components. And of course, there is an input required, which is a tough problem to solve. And the output is the scientific and logical solution. This is the framework for the modern science, the method of modern science, the logic of scientific method, which is also the method explained in Nyaya Darshan, for example, and all of our Darshana-Shastra with some variations. So we have a tough problem to solve. We propose a theory, okay? We propose a solution. And then we look at what is the evidence, how can we objectively test that evidence, and how can we draw the conclusion. And depending on what the problem is, depending on what the possible solution we propose, we immediately end up defining what is the background knowledge that we are going to use, what is the background knowledge we are going to assume to be correct. Okay, every time we don't go and prove everything. If we start doing that, then you know what? Guess what? It's known as a prasanga sama. It will be an infinite regression. So how do you know that this is true? And how do you know that this is true? So we take certain things for granted. Okay, so that's the background knowledge. That's the agama. That is a shabda. Many different words can be used for that. All right. So let's take his first problem here. Fortunately, it's not a tough problem. Okay, but that doesn't mean it doesn't need to be answered. In fact, as I said, it's a chronic confusion. It's a frequently asked question. How can you prove war chariots used by warriors in 5561 BCE? Now, why does this problem, why is this question asked multiple times? The reason is because we have not found any chariots. We have not found yet any chariots that when they dated, and we'll not go into the dating methods, we'll assume that those are correct, they can be trusted, okay, going back to 5561 BC. Now, is this correct? Yeah, that's absolutely correct. So we can say that as a evidence, or rather the lack of evidence. And so there is no very objective empirical way where we can say, yeah, a chariot exists, I found it, I have seen it, and it has been dated to 6th millennium BCE, which is 5561 BCE. 5561 BCE is the middle of 6th millennium BCE. All right, now what do we do? Okay, so although MJ has not clearly stated it, his point is, since you, or his point appears to be, we don't know for sure. I wish he would have stated that clearly, which is to say, hey, since you cannot show the chariots in India in 5561 BCE, therefore, you cannot claim Mahabharata war happening in 5561 BC. He has not explicitly stated that, but that appears to be his concern, or that appears to be his challenge, to me. Or maybe somebody would have challenged him, assuming he's already convinced of 5561 BC. Okay, so how do we go around this? Okay, let's look at how did we arrive at the date of 5561 BCE. Therefore, understanding the logic of scientific method is very crucial. How did I arrive at specific year of 5561 BC? Actually, from only one discipline of hard sciences, namely astronomy. In the Mahabharata text, there are more than 300 specific astronomy observations. I extracted all of them, or as many as I could. I can never say that I have not missed up one or two, or many, maybe more, but every time I come across a new one, and that process continues, by the way. I will not digress myself and mention some of the latest observations, astronomy observations that I had missed even 12 years ago that I found. And I'm very happy to tell you that those astronomy observations also lead you to 5561 BCE and no other year. But my point is 300 plus specific pieces of astronomy descriptions, and all of them objectively tested in a scientific fashion with mathematical calculation, with astronomy, simulation softwares, various other methods. They all lead to 5561 BC as the year of Mahabharata war, no other year. Now, is that the only evidence? Well, that could have been the only evidence. Remember, pramana tasyartha pratipatte. We can only test the evidence that is available to us and draw some conclusions and be open for changing our conclusion if required with additional evidence. But with the current available evidence, we can say that the best answer for the year of Mahabharata war is 5561 BC. Now we have more reason, we have an additional reason to feel more confident. Astronomy's phenomenon is the most successful, most precise, most accurate, okay, output of the modern science of last 500 years. Nothing comes closer, guys. Nothing comes closer. Now we have some additional fascinating things, but still they are far away in comparison to the precision and accuracy of what is been established in the discipline of astronomy. I say like genetics and whatnot. Actually, I have included genetics, but there are many other disciplines, and fortunately, the Mahabharata text has evidence which can be tested against these additional disciplines of hard sciences, such as geology, hydrology, climatology, oceanography, genetics, sedimentology, genealogy. Now, genealogy is a bit softer one. It's like a list of kings and descendants and so on. So you may exclude that. Domestication of animals, again, a very hard archaeology. Agriculture, very hard archaeology. and all of them point to 555-61 BC or support 55-61 BC as the year of Mahabharata war. In fact, in science, there is nothing like prove. In ordinary language, we say, how do you prove this? How will you prove it? In science, there is nothing like a proof. We don't prove anything in science. Either we corroborate, which means we find this formulation, triangulation that tends to support our theory, and definitely does not falsify our theory. Because if it's falsified, it's gone. We have to go look for another theory. So that is the answer to the first question. Broadly speaking, this is also due to a phenomenon. It's not the name given by me. The confusion is the absence of evidence is treated as evidence of absence. So since I have not found it until now, we have not found something, a chariot, spoked wheel chariot. We have not found it going back to the time of 6th millennium BC. Therefore, it doesn't exist. Okay, evidence, we take that as the evidence of absence. This is a scientific mistake, a blunder. This is a logical mistake. Okay, this is intellectual mistake, but that is very common. Okay, I mean, I get like, I don't know, 10, 20, I mean, all the comments on the social media basically fall into this category. So this is the answer. Okay, there is a lot more evidence, even much more interesting, much more crucial than just finding a chariot. And all that evidence shown at the bottom there, when tested using the most sophisticated scientific method, actually leads us to 55-61 BC. So based on that, we can draw an inference that yes, I mean, everything is existing, very sophisticated. So if Mahabharata mentions something about astronomy, and that is shown to be true, and it only leads you to 55-61 BC. If Mahabharata mentions something in geology, in hydrology, climatology, oceanography, genetics, sedimentology, okay, and all of these descriptions, domestication of animals like horses, let's not ignore the horse at all, or elephants, okay, agriculture, sophistication, weather. If all of these descriptions, when tested using these hard sciences, if they all are leading me to 55-61 BC or supporting the claim of 55-61 BC, just because I have not found a chariot that is dated to 6th millennium BC, I have no reason to say, oh, therefore Mahabharata war did not happen. Actually, it is illogical, it's unscientific, and it's utterly foolish. Okay, so let's go to the next one. But let me give you a couple of examples from our times, and that might help people bring home this point. For example, in the case of Shivaji Maharaj, Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj, Go Brahman Pratipalak Kshatriya Kulavatams Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj. Okay, Baba Saheb Purandare has written a lot about it. Many other authors have written a lot about it. There are Bakhar, and so many different literature, which tells you a lot about Shivaji Maharaj. His descendants are still there. It's not that long ago, 400 years or so, less than 400 years. Now, in his biography, we can say, Shivaji Maharaj had one sword called Bhavani Talwar or Tarwar, okay, Talwar or Tarwar. And as the narration goes, okay, that it was given by goddess Bhavani to him. Now, depending on who you listen to, it will say, oh, it personally, goddess Bhavani gave it to him. Now, how do we interpret that statement 400 years later? Now, some people who have enough bhakti or who have some personal experiences of them seeing the devatas giving them darshan and so on, they will say, yeah, actually, that's exactly what would have happened because it's based on their experience. Somebody may take this as metaphorically, okay? And there could be 10 different interpretations for this incident as to what it means when goddess Bhavani gave a talwar to Shivaji, and then Shivaji named it Bhavani Talwar and so on. By the way, greetings to you for the Navratra, all the 9 days of 9 different forms of Devi that we are celebrating. Okay. All right. So now the question is, just because we cannot explain, or just because we cannot find a empirical explanation or empirical objectively testable evidence to exactly show what it means when goddess Bhavani gave a talwar to Shivaji, this can be discussed, this can be analyzed, this can be kept on the side, but in no way this has any implications on the existence of Raja Shivaji, existence of all the amazing things he did for the Hindu Rashtra. There is no reason to doubt any of it. Let's take another example. So this is from 17th century, Shivaji Maharaj. Going back to say 13th century, we have in Maharashtra, we have a story of three brothers and a sister, Jnaneshwar, Nivruttinath, Sopandev, and Muktabai. And in their biography, there is a story that somebody, I will not spend time on the details, somebody comes to meet him, and they all four siblings are sitting on a wall, just taking some sunlight. And Dhaneshwar feels that we should go. Somebody's coming riding on a tiger, and we need to go and welcome in appropriate way. I'll not go into the story. People can go to Wikipedia, read about Dhaneshwar, and you will get this story. So Dhaneshwar, with his siddhi, as the story goes, makes the wall fly with all the four siblings sitting on it, okay, and so on. And that's how the meeting happens. Now, how did this happen? How did Dhaneshwar made the wall fly? We don't know that. Again, same logic. Somebody with enough Shraddha might able to accept it without asking the questions. Somebody else with no Shraddha or no understanding of a spirituality will say it's next to impossible. It's absolutely impossible. Show me unless you can show me a demonstration of it, I won't believe it. And people in between may interpret this in a different ways. They may take it metaphorically, but the point remains, just because we cannot explain this particular event, or just because we cannot explain or show evidence today, or cannot recreate these experiments, either Bhavani giving a sword to somebody, like literally coming out of a murti and doing this, or like somebody making the wall fly, just because we cannot show that, on that count, we cannot simply throw away the whole story narration, the existence of Dhaneshwar, he's writing Dhaneshwari, Amrutanubhav, or Shivaji Maharaj creating a Hindavi Swarajya. It will be foolish, utterly foolish, okay? It will be like throwing the baby with the bathwater. I just gave you those two instances. Just because somebody has not found the chariot going back to 6th millennium BCE, to think, therefore, hey, we cannot discuss Mahabharata is utterly foolish, utterly nonsensical, utterly unscientific, and utterly illogical. Okay, let's go to the next one. Just I want to give you a thought experiment about the chariots that MJ mentioned, that now we have found at Sanauli or someplace like that. And it has been dated to about, say, 2000 BCE. Okay, that is that Sanauli chariot, some artist reconstruction, okay, and dated to 2000 BCE. And then there are some other pictures and different types of chariots. Again, this could be artist reconstruction. This could be some pictures or the sculptures found on the walls and so on. And then there are some timelines given for these. I do not know how these timelines were identified, but let's not question any of it. There is no need to question it to answer the question that MJ has asked. Let us take all of this to be true and no reason to doubt it. Now, if somebody doubts it, then that person has to do the tapasya, go deeper and try to find out how they determine the dating for this each specific specimen. Was this just an artist reconstruction? Did they find the whole chariot, or just they found a wheel and people imagine chariots? I mean, that's something one needs to do if one questions this. But to answer MJ's question, we don't need to question any of this. Now, I want to give you a thought experiment. Let's for a minute forget these chariots which were found outside India for different dates. But suppose that Sinauli chariot that was found not that long ago, just a few years ago. And imagine, so of course, I'll come to that. But imagine instead of 2000 BCE, if the date was came out to be 5500 BCE. Just for a second, okay? Come 5500 BCE, which is right in the ballpark of the Mahabharata war. And I hope, okay, that the Vivek would prevail and someone like MJ or others wouldn't ask, but hold on, that's 61 years after the Mahabharata war or something like this, or what, so maybe at the time of Mahabharata war, how do you know that the chariot existed? It might have existed 61 years after. I'm just joking, but actually this is not a joke. People go to that level to actually ask that question. But my thought experiment for all of you is, what if this chariot actually was dated to 5500 BCE, or to make it even simple, was dated to say 6000 BCE, which is to say 500 years before the Mahabharata war. Now is someone like MJ or the folks who are stuck into this chronic confusion of absence of evidence, treating as a evidence of absence, or unless you show me a horse, unless you show me a domesticated horse, unless you show me a chariot, I cannot understand or cannot accept Mahabharata happening in 5561 BCE. These people will always struggle. Okay, this has nothing to do with the evidence. This has nothing to do with the scientific method. This has everything to do with the lack of scientific acumen, lack of logical reasoning, and not able to connect the dots. Now, to be fair to MJ, the point remains that yes, we have not found the evidence for a chariot going back to 6 millennium BCE. But why is that a problem? That's what I said. If somebody uses the chariot as a evidence to arrive at a certain date of the Mahabharata or certain date of historical event, if that is the person's prime evidence, then yes, there should be a discussion. And I'm going to show you utter nonsensical stuff that is created out of this. Just right on this page. When the Sinali chariot was found and it was dated to 2000 BCE, do you know what kind of news were coming out in the newspapers? Utterly foolish, disastrous. Okay, I mean, I don't have enough adjectives to give it to that stupidity. There were newspaper articles, almost all newspapers, multiple newspapers in India and possibly other places, that Mahabharata war happened in 2000 BCE. What kind of nonsense is that? All that you have done is you have found a chariot. Does this look like a Mahabharata chariot? Is the only time the chariots were used? Is someone saying that the chariots were not used before Mahabharata and chariots were never used after Mahabharata? If the answer is no, that's not the case. The chariots were there before, after, definitely in our later times, today. Okay. So why this stupidity that people find in archaeological dig, the dirt archaeology, a chariot, they happen to date it to 2000 BC, and next thing they jump and they say Mahabharata war happened in 2000 BC. And if you think I am blaming the journalist, and people will say, come on, journalists do that these days, it's becoming very frustrating kind of business. Let me tell you, there are extremely idiotic researchers who are using the Sanauli chariot evidence to now say, look, Mahabharata war happened in 2000 BCE, and actually they're writing books about it. Okay, they're writing articles, they're writing books. Now, this is when I'm saying it's extremely idiotic. Now, is this a good thing or is this a bad thing? No, not at all. I'm so glad that they are putting their thoughts, they are putting their conclusions in print, so that when hopefully likes of me and others, when they actually critique that stupidity, they will not able to hide behind something and say, I never said this, I never wrote this and something, because now they have written about it and it's in a print, it can be referenced, or they have said this on say YouTube talks, or the talks that came out on the YouTube, they are there in the public domain. So in that sense, it's a very good thing. It's very good for the manthan that we need for Indic Renaissance, Indic Revolution. Actually, there are people who, looking at the Sinali chariot and its dating, have jumped to the conclusion, okay, and in a very cocky fashion, they are saying the Mahabharata war happened in 2000 BC, around that, and look, here is the evidence. Sinali is the evidence. To show what is stupid about it, I want to take another example, another thought experiment. very well connected to Mahabharata, which has to do with the flooding and destruction of Krishna's Dwarka. And I want to show you one piece of evidence. This is from Aceh Banda, okay, the northwestern corner of Sumatra Island, Indonesia, and therefore very close to Andaman Nicobar Islands, okay, very close to India. Again, it doesn't matter because the evidence for the flooding and destruction, sudden sea level rise, and lot of destruction or changes in the geography or the ports and so on is seen around the world, okay, in 5525 BCE, which is the year arrived at based on my work on the dating of Mahabharata and for the dating and flooding and destruction of Dwarka. But the point I want to mention is this. You might know Professor Rao. I don't know, I don't remember his first initials, with oceanography studies done on the West Coast, with the India's some organization. Let me not state the name, I'll state it wrong. He's no longer with us. What he had done is that he had studied, okay, the flooding and sudden sea level rise and so on. And based on that, this is not his paper, by the way. This paper came in 2018 or 2019. Okay. But in that area, so if you look at the scale here, okay, so 1500 BCE is like what? 3,500 years ago. Okay, this is a before present. So about here. So if you look at this, you see these clustered tsunamis. There is evidence of clustered tsunamis from Indonesia. But interestingly, and not surprisingly, Professor Rao or Dr. Rao, he had found the evidence on the Indian coast. Not surprising, it's the same tsunami, very close, and it's going to affect and hopefully leave the evidence. We were lucky, it left the evidence, and that evidence can be found here in this paper coming from Indonesia. Dr. Rao also found it. But after that, I don't know if it's Dr. Rao or other members of his team or he himself, I don't know that. But based on there was evidence for sudden rise or evidence for tsunamis going back to 1500 BCE, either him or his team or somebody else looking at that data immediately jumped to the conclusion, guess what? The Mahabharata war happened around 1500 BCE. Now, as a first crude hunch, it's reasonable. But then once after that happens, now you have to go to Mahabharata and start looking at additional evidence to see if it matches. Because if you look into this picture, guess what? There are many evidences of sea level, many instances, okay? And the evidence, therefore, corresponding evidence for a sea level rise going back to, just from this study, going back to 7,500 years. Actually, this first event that you're showing, this is a beautiful story by itself, but that's not the subject today. This first event itself is the Dwarka event, flooding and destruction of Dwarka, okay, 5525 BCE. And actually the water kept on rising for next while, okay, and then it was steady. There was no further rise, okay, no additional tsunamis for the middle 2000-year portion, okay, within which actually 80 out of 130 Mahabharata researchers claim that Mahabharata war happened there. They will not able to explain. Of course, they cannot explain Mahabharata text evidence, astronomy, or all the disciplines I mentioned, but they will also will not able to. They will not able to mention the evidence or show the evidence, demonstrate the evidence for flooding and destruction of Dwarka. In fact, after I brought this paper into public discussion, many of these Mahabharata researchers who are dogmatically stuck themselves in this middle region of, say, from 3,500 BCE to like 1500 BCE, and there are a majority of them are there. They have very what do you say, diplomatically, okay, of course, unscientifically and illogically, but to save their skin, okay, they have said, guess what? Before they were claiming some crater hitting the ocean, and therefore this is happening, significant sea level rise and all that. After this evidence, and this evidence is consistent around the world, that there was nothing happening, especially no sea level rise or no tsunamis between 3500 BC and 1500 BC. Now they have changed the tune. See how the politics may come into a historical research. They have said, oh, this was not a big event. The flooding and destruction of Dwarka, Krishna's Dwarka, was not a big event. It was a minor local event. Why? Because this evidence not only is not useful to them, but it goes against their claims and it decisively falsifies it. Okay. The reason I said is anyone in a very naive fashion, as in naivete, okay, in a very simplistic thinking, illogical thinking, may just look at any of this peak, like say I said, oh, this is a peak for flooding and destruction of Dwarka. Somebody may say, no, I don't think. I think this is the peak for flooding and destruction of Dwarka. Somebody may say it like this, just like Professor Rao and his team did. But a triangulation demands that is there any additional evidence which tends to take you there? And where is that evidence? Where do we look for that evidence? We look for that evidence in the Mahabharata text. And as I showed you before, if you look at the evidence from the Mahabharata, which can be objectively tested using multiple disciplines of sciences, that will take you to 5561 BC. It will not take you to 1500 BC. In fact, the evidence of the Mahabharata text, genetics, geology, the hydrology, astronomy, all of that evidence will decisively show that 1500 BC, 2000 BC, 3000 BC, 3500 BC are decisively false. So remember, I said forget the proving versus disproving. That's not the language of science. The language of science is corroboration and falsification. I'm saying not only it will not corroborate these dates, any date after 4500 BCE for the year of Mahabharata war, but the evidence both from Mahabharata text when matched with the scientific corroboration decisively falsifies these dates. Okay, quickly. I think I'm done. Oh, there was a second question. How can you prove? It's related, by the way, so we can go fast through this. How can you prove 5561 BC as the year of Mahabharata war with archaeology evidence? Now, I'll go fast through this. This person, what's his name, MJ, he asked this question in response to the article that I had posted with the link. I don't know what the issue seems to be, because either he did not read my article, or assuming he read my article, he did not understand it, he did not comprehend it, because that 5,000 word article actually goes through an immense archaeology evidence, showing that all archaeology evidence leads to 5561 BCE. Now, still he is asking this question. So as I said, he may not have read it, or assuming he has read it, he did not understand it. But there could be a third problem. The third problem is that many people, and that could be a problem with MJ too, and MJ, don't feel bad, because there are many academics, many so-called experts, many decorated public personalities who have an extremely naive, immature, and wrong understanding of what archaeology is. And I'll just quickly summarize and give you a link for everyone to read. For example, look at the list at the bottom. Astronomy, geology, hydrology, climatology, oceanography, genetics, sedimentology. I will skip genealogy, that will not fall there. And for simplicity, let's even skip domestication of animals and agriculture, okay, and Ayurveda. But astronomy, geology, hydrology, climatology, oceanography, genetics, sedimentology, 7. And there could be many more. There are actually many more, but they are sub-disciplines. 7 disciplines here that are listed are all archaeology. So why is this confusion that MJ has, and many of the academics have, many of the Mahabharata experts have this same confusion, and many of the decorated so-called researchers have this confusion? They say, where is the archaeology evidence? Okay. The problem is they are still stuck into something known as dirt archaeology, which is very prevalent in Europe. Okay, because they don't have any historical records. They don't have, until like 500 years ago, they didn't have a decent idea, forget precise and accurate, a decent idea of how to measure time. They did not have a stable language, and there are no histories written using these things or even otherwise. Okay, so there is no way for them to understand their history through books or through literature. In fact, until 150, 200 years ago, for the Western Europe or rest of the world, history simply meant Bible. History simply meant whatever is written in Old Testament and New Testament, and that is to be simply taken on the faith, on belief. There was nothing else like that. Even after modern science began 500 years ago in the Western Europe, okay? I'm saying this was the story of history, Western history, until 150 years ago. That's not the case in India. Okay. Anyways, so the 7 disciplines I mentioned are actually archaeology disciplines, much more sophisticated, order of magnitudes, plural sophisticated than the dirt archaeology. Okay, which is dig something, date it, like the Sanauli chariot. Okay, I mean, we should be happy anytime we find something, and it's very exciting to actually have some fossil, on your in your living room. It's an old statue, that looks fascinating, archaic, and can be a discussion piece when your friends and relatives visit your place. But in terms of its value in knowing about our civilization, antiquity, okay, our meaning not just Indian, around the world, it's extremely limited. Unfortunately, that is the point, still not understood. Okay, and that's why I'm doing something like this, for example, to bring it to people's attention quickly. I will encourage people to read this. This particular paper is actually filled with nothing but archaeology evidence. Okay, the 7 disciplines that I mentioned. Now, because of the limitations on the word, I could not discuss everything. So I have not discussed geology. I have not discussed hydrology. I have not discussed climatology. And I have not discussed genealogy, domestication of animals, and so on. But the first 7, I have discussed astronomy. I have discussed oceanography. I have discussed genetics, and I have discussed sedimentology. So 3, 4 disciplines, and they are all archaeology, guys. There is something known as archaeoastronomy. There is something known as archaeogenetics. There is something known as paleoclimatology. There is known as oceanography, paleooceanography, sedimentology, paleosedimentology. Paleo, or these words basically, or archeo words, refer to studying the past. Okay, so that's quickly the answer. I would encourage you to read this quickly. My books, these are on Amazon, and if you are in India, then you can get this from Subbu Publications, a lot less expensive, instead of ordering a book from Amazon. So if you are in India, don't, as much as possible, don't order from Amazon. It's going to cost you a lot more. Okay, unless you buy Subbu books from Amazon. But why not go directly to Subbu? Okay, and just get these books. Now, some people may think, okay, so is this everything that I discussed? Is this discussed in these books? Actually, a lot of that is discussed in these books, but not everything, because my research is ongoing, and I have found a lot more stuff, and I have not found time to put them into the books. However, the reason I want you to read them, assuming you are interested, okay, into this area, is besides you, I mean, somebody will say, come on, now I know what you are going to say. Mahabharata, what happened in 55-61 BC? Okay. Some of the people who like it say, okay, I'm convinced. And other people say, you know what, unless you show me the chariot, unless you show me that Mathura existed in 55-61 BC, Kurukshetra and Hastinapur existed in 55-61 BC, and unless you show me a domesticated horse evidence going back to 6 millennium BC, guess what? I'm not interested. Well, I mean, it's bad for that person, because the person has not understood how science works, doesn't understand the logic. But freedom of choice, Okay, freedom of choice, freedom of thought is one of the foundation, a cornerstone of Sanatana philosophy, a Hindu philosophy, and therefore I would say good luck. Okay, everyone has a whatever they want to believe in, because people quickly jump back to the belief. Okay, when they don't understand science, they don't understand logic, they quickly jump back to belief. The belief can be on one side, like say what we call astic. The belief can be on the other side, nastic. Atheist is also belief in a lot of things. Okay, and the theist also believes in a lot of things. In fact, if you see the front poster for this series, I have shown two rail tracks with the Prajna and Shraddha. I'll talk about that some other time. But I have also written three words, which is a Pujya Buddhi, a Pramanya Buddhi, and a Viveka Buddhi. Okay, whether you are on the extreme side of being atheistic or non-scientific, uh, non-empiricist or whatever, uh, or you are on the extreme theist side, like, my guru said this to me, I don't need to ask any other questions. Both parties in reality have never grown out of Pujya Buddhi or a Shraddha Buddhi. Now, that is not wrong by itself. That allows us to live a life. Like Shankaracharya said, and Manu also says that, basically, Satyanrute Dve Mithuni Krutya Vartate Lokayatra. To live our life, whatever knowledge we use, actually, it's a mixture of right and wrong, good and bad, true and false. But what other option we have? So we use it. But some people, by luck and by their own tapasya, and could be many factors, they can bring themselves out of it. Doesn't mean they leave it. They leave the Shraddha Buddhi. That is very much required. The Pujya Buddhi is required. But it has to also grow into a Pramanya Buddhi and also Viveka Buddhi. So the reason I was saying all this is that beyond the fact that the Mahabharata war happened in 5561 BC, or the Ramayana happened, or Ram-Ravan Yuddha happened in 12,209 BC, there is a lot more as it relates to the scientific acumen, as it relates to logical reasoning, as it relates to something beyond the modern science triangulation of explanation, prediction, testing, of what Krishna says is that he's talking of quadrangulation. Shruti, Pratyaksha, Aitiyam, Anumanam, Chatushtayam. The four things, unless they come together, okay, and you solve that as a jigsaw puzzle, a crossword puzzle, your knowledge is always going to remain unstable. Okay, and this is one demonstration of it. No matter how much evidence is presented, somebody wants to see a physical, a practical, a pratyaksha evidence of goddess Bhavani giving a talwar to Shivaji, or a Jnaneshwara making the wall fly, or a chariot with spoked wheels that belongs to 6th millennium BC, or a domesticated horse in India that horse fossils supposedly that can be dated to 6th millennium BC. And the person says, unless I see this, I don't know how to look at this evidence. Well, that has to do with the lack of scientific acumen. That has to do with the lack of logical reasoning. That has to do with the misunderstanding or no understanding of the logic of scientific method, or Nyaya Darshana, or Krishna's quadrangulation. Thank you very much. Please write your comments. Let me know how did you like it. Feel free to post your questions. Make sure that those are very sharp questions, but you don't worry about it. You post if you have a genuine questions, be genuine about it. I like to thank MJ for posing that question. It could be his own questions, or he could be acting as a proxy for someone else's question who might have asked him. It doesn't matter. Again, remember, it's not about the individual who asked the questions. There is no intention of putting any individual down. It is the discussion is done in a rigorous fashion so that there are takeaways for all of us, and to keep on improving ourselves together for Indic Renaissance, for Indic Revolution. Thank you very much. All right. Let's see you sometime soon in the next episode of Shraddha and Prajna.